we have in the beginning of the Gospels the choice of these 12. They have different forms in the Gospels. One of them insists on the fact that he actually spent a night in prayer before doing so. This is not indifferent either with regard to the model given for us, because great decisions are made after bringing our Creator into the affair and not on our own. Some people rush into life decisions, whether it be proposals of marriage, orientation of a life career, or a vocation, without that element of ponderation, and the result can be catastrophic. Oh, if only I had known, and so on. There's an old saying in French, tension est mauvaise conseillère, tension is a bad counsellor. Decisions of this nature are made calmly, without any pressure. In fact, there is, specifically in the Jesuit order, a whole spirituality of this election, with the conditions provided in which the correct election of a state of life can take place. 30 days, with nothing but the vertical. And they still do happen, and they can still have the same effect, because essentially they leave the soul exposed in full force to the grace of God and the power of truth, without any distraction in the way. So the chances are that a good choice will be made after a long period of that nature. Certainly more so than in, for instance, some emotional atmosphere produced in which one, just like that, decides one way or another. The warning is there already in the parable of the sower with regard to roots, depth. The demon is very able to take away, and also cares and worries can strangle, whereas those 30 days of complete openness are calm, and the Lord needs calm to get through. He does not like noise, he does not like confusion. And by the way, we are handicapped in our age because we have made ourselves more confused and noisy than before through access to more messages than before virtually. And it's now the holy addiction of the pious, and there's too much in their head. God simply can't get through. And also one can see it sometimes in the effect that that might have on teaching or preaching. Because if much time in the evening has been spent on that kind of thing, there is no depth of work coming in. Books speak more calmly than screens. It's a different mode of input. And often the older books are actually more solid and more effective than the latest noise and bleep. We have too many messages in our head. Our generation is succeeding very well to block out the still small voice and intimacy with the same. So we can reproduce that by having places and spaces, times and seasons where that is deliberately allowed to happen and nothing else. It can mean geographic separation. We were blessed actually there when I was ordained in a monastery in Italy not to have access to these things, partly because we couldn't. There was a great advantage having a medieval church with very thick walls. No signals could get through. Life is more peaceful in nature. But then, with regard to what happens afterwards, we have also this, which is in this Gospel quite clearly. And he appointed 12, and it doesn't say, first of all, to go out. It says, to be with him. And that was picked up by a commentary made one day very quietly, as he would do normally, but in depth, by Pope Benedict. He always got to the depth of things. He put together very well these two poles, to be with him, and then only to do what he wanted them to do. And that's the bit that has to happen. Nowadays, in seminaries, there is not the same proportion of that being with him as used to be some years ago, because if one looked at the timetable, it was fairly contemplative actually in quite a few seminaries. There was a lot of prayer going on, a lot of silence and study. So they were very well formed into interiority over 6 or 7 years. Now, if one looks at the timetable, there are a lot of meetings going on, there are a lot of activities such as actually going into a parish over a weekend. It depends on the seminary. But those moments of intimacy may no longer be there. Also, the great silence was kept after Compline. That was about 12 out of the 24 hours, even in the seminary, which were of intimacy with Jesus, that one was going to serve as a friend. So that work in depth risks not being there, and one can see the fruit, because if nowadays, I keep hearing them actually, time after time, one hears of these casualties, shortly, we're talking about 2 or 3 years after ordination, good young priests coming to grief. Well, probably it's linked with this, because if there's a calm, ongoing, profound interior life of intimacy with Jesus Christ, in which the rhythm of the old seminary system of much prayer before anything else happened in the morning and so on, and then back to base, if that's happening after ordination and not being plunged into the work of 4 or 5 other priests which are no longer there, then the safeguards are there. But if they're not, then one is open to what? Being too thinly spread. And therefore one is listening not to the vertical but to the horizontal, and even to oneself, but not the better part. And one is easy prey then for eventual very low immune systems and what that will lead to, the immediate, being centre stage. So depth has its effect, and if it's not there, we'll see the consequences. And then only this other one, to be sent out, apostolane, to preach, that's one, and then have authority to cast out demons. So there's the power of the word and the authority over the other side, which only the priests directly have. Although Christians praying together also have a certain authority, but the maximum has to have not only a priest, but one who has the faculties for exorcism. And by the way, we know from what we gather from talking to this one and that one, that's also recognised even among Pentecostals quite often. They know that some cases, even in their own, demand access to a proper exorcist, because they're fighting the same enemy and they know the same patterns. We are quite close actually to our Pentecostal friends on certain things, far more close sometimes spiritually than ultra-modern Catholics, but that's another parenthesis. And so he goes on with the actual list, and each of these lists starts with Peter and ends with Judas. And the choice of Judas, according to what was shown to Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, wasn't quite the same as that of the other 11, because it seems that he saw that he was on a winning streak if he joined this group. And that's the first example, perhaps, of careerism. It wasn't absent either from the others entirely, because we have it coming through with the episode of James and John going to the Lord, but that's another story. But this one, it seems that he himself offered himself, and the Lord saw the 2 ways ahead. He could have gone either way, he wasn't entirely bad, but he knew, of course, as Son of God, what was going to happen, and a kind of shiver went down his spine. He knew this actually was the traitor. So it can happen. And I've lost good young priest friends through casualties, and I know, having been with them, that they will never probably have that deep peace again, especially if they've gone into a situation where they're not in any way regularized, because they've been too close to him, and their soul can't get away from their truth. It comes even out in their dreams at night. Their identity is in them forever. So with regard to ourselves, this very day actually I was writing a letter to person in England who wanted advice on his possible vocation. All one can do is make sure that the means of contact are wide open so that he is actually in the driving seat. If that happens, a certain simplification takes place, e.g. what the French referred to as la sainte indifférence, holy indifference. One dies. And until one is dead, the Lord is not entirely free to move us and make us move only as He wants.